Hi there, welcome to my YouTube channel Dhyani classes. If you are watching my video for the first time, do subscribe my channel, hit the bell icon so that I get notified whenever new video will be uploaded. So in today's video we will cover the second part of the chapter, The Portrait of a Lady, written by Khushwant Singh from class 11 CBSE. So let's get started. So in the first part of the chapter we have seen that his parents called him back to the city to live, and that was turning point of friendship between grandmother and grandson. And he used to go to school by school bus, and his grandmother started feeding sparrow because he no longer came to the school with him, and then they rarely met each other or see each other, and grandma was not able to go with him to school because every day he used to go to school by the school bus. So let's begin with the second part of the chapter now. For some time she continued to wake me up and get me ready for school. So here the author is saying that his grandmother used to wake him up and help him to get ready for the school, but later on she was busy in feeding sparrows and did not come to wake him up. When I came back she would ask me what the teacher had taught me. That means she used to ask him every day what the teacher had taught him when I used to come back from the school. I would tell her English words, little things of Western science and learning, the law of gravity, Archimedes' principle, the world being around, etc. This made her unhappy. She could not help me with my lessons. So here he would tell her about some English words that he had learnt, and the Western science and learning, the law of gravity. That means he used to tell her all about the science and technology and what is happening around the world in terms of science and discoveries. So all these things made her unhappy because she doesn't know English and she could not help him with his learning. Further he says she did not believe in the things they taught at the English school and was distressed that there was no teaching about God and scriptures. So here the author is saying that she did not like English school because there was no teaching about God and the scriptures, and she was really feeling very sad and distressed about that whatever they taught him in English school. One day I announced that we were being given music lessons. She was very disturbed. So one day he informed her that we were being given a music lessons. That means he is being taught music. And after hearing this, she was very disturbed. That means she did not like music being taught to her grandson. To her, music had lewd associations. It was the monopoly of harlots and beggars and not meant for gentle folk. So here he is saying that in her perception about the music, that music is lewd. That means vulgar and people wasting their time to learn music, and only vulgar people engaging themselves into learning music. And she thought music is just for beggar and prostitutes and not for the wise and decent people. So that's why she did not like to music taught in the school. She said nothing, but her silence meant disapproval. She rarely talked to me after that. So here the author is saying that she never said anything about it and she kept herself quiet about it. That means she was not happy to see him attend music classes and all. And after that she rarely talked to him. That means she started avoiding conversation with him and their friendship came closer to an end. Further he says, when I went up to university, I was given a room of my own. The common link of friendship was snapped. So when Khushwant Singh took admission to the university, he had a separate room there and he spent all his time there in university. That means the friendship between grandma and grandson broke up and they separated from each other. While she sat in the veranda breaking the bread into little bits, hundreds of little birds collected round her, creating a veritable bedlam of chirruping. So here grandma used to feed the birds and she used to break the bread into pieces in front of the house. So all these birds would come and create a lot of noise, and when she used to feed them, so birds collected all around her and would create a lot of noise. Some came and perched on her legs, others on her shoulders, some even sat on her head. So when grandma used to feed the sparrow, sparrow used to come and sat in her legs, and some on her shoulder and other even on her head. She smiled but never showed them away. So she was very happy with the birds and she spent a lot of time with them at veranda and she never showed them away. That means she never blew them up. It used to be the happiest half hour of the day for her. So here the author is saying that it used to be the happiest day for her when she used to spend half hour every day while feeding the birds, and she would feel happy. When I decided to go abroad for further studies, I was sure my grandmother would be upset. So here author is saying that when he decided to go abroad for after college for further studies, he was sure that his grandmother would be upset and would feel disappointed because she will not be able to talk to or see him. I would be away for 5 years, and at her age one could never tell, but my grandmother could. So here, as he was planning to go abroad for 5 years, and that was such a long time, and his grandmother was very old at that time, so he thought that when he will be back from abroad, his grandmother probably will not be alive after 5 years, and says, but my grandmother could. That means he will be able to see his grandmother once again, and he was sure that his grandmother will be alive till the time he will be back. She was not even sentimental. So here he is saying that his grandmother was not really sentimental. That means she was not worried or tensed about going far away from her grandson for 5 years. She came to live at the railway station but did not talk or show any emotion. So here he is saying that his grandmother was so affectionate towards him, and she came to leave him at the railway station, but she did not talk or show any emotion. That means she didn't utter a single word or didn't show any emotions. That means she was very strong lady at that time. So despite of knowing that her grandson left her for 5 years, but she never showed any emotion on her face. Her lips moved in prayer, her mind was lost in prayer. So she was busy in prayer and her mind was lost in prayers. That means his grandmother used to do prayers, and she was continuously keeping herself in the prayers at the railway station. Her fingers were busy telling the beads of her rosary. So grandmother used to keep her finger busy in moving rosary, which she used to carry, and telling the prayer. Silently she kissed my forehead, and when I left I cherished a moist print as perhaps the last sign of physical contact between us, but that was not so. So here grandma kissed her forehead when he was about to leave from the railway station, and he felt very happy and felt that perhaps that was the last physical contact between us. That means that was the only moment when he saw or met his grandmother, and he was not certain that he would be able to see her again because she was very old woman at that time, and says, but that was not so. That means he saw his grandmother once again, as he was thinking that he would not be able to see his grandmother once again. After 5 years I came back home and was met by her at the station. She did not look a day older. So when he came back after finishing his study from abroad, he saw his grandmother at the station, and he saw that she was looking a day older. That means she was looking the same age as 5 years earlier. She still had no time for words, and while she clasped me in her arms, I could hear her reciting her prayers. So here the author is saying that when he met again with the grandmother, she had no time for words. That means she was busy in prayer, and when he hugged him, he could hear that she is still reciting her prayers. Even on the first day of my arrival, her happiest moments were with her sparrows, whom she fed longer and with frivolous rebukes. So when he reached home and spent one day, he noticed that grandma was not happy at all, and she was happy when she was feeding sparrows, and she used to feed sparrows with frivolous rebuke. That means criticized or checked on the sparrows in vain. That means he was talking without any reason to sparrow while feeding them. In the evening a change came over her. She did not pray. So here, as she used to do prayer in the evening every day, but on that day the author noticed a change in her, that she did not pray in the evening. Further he says, she collected the women of the neighborhood, got an old drum and started to sing. So that evening she collected the women of the neighborhood. That means she called numbers of women from the neighborhood and got an old drum and started singing. That means she started singing along with them. For several hours she thumped the sagging skin of the dilapidated drum and sang of the homecoming of warriors. So for many hours she was thumping the sagging skin of the dilapidated drum. That means it was a very old fashioned and damaged drum which she was thumping from her fingers, and she was beating that drum while singing with others, and she was singing a song, Homecoming of Warriors. That means it was a kind of patriotic song. We had to persuade her to stop to avoid overstraining. That was the first time since I had known her that she did not pray. So here the author is saying that we had to persuade to her to stop to avoid overstraining. That means avoid taking unnecessary stress, and that was the time when he had known her that she did not pray. That means that was the first time he saw that she was in busy in singing with other women, and she did not pray for a long time on that day. The next morning she was taken ill. It was a mild fever and the doctor told us that it would go. So next morning she was taken ill. That means she got sick and it was a low fever, and doctor told them that it would go. That means she will get well soon. So it was just a mild fever. But my grandmother thought differently. She told us that her end was near. So here the author is saying that my grandmother thought differently and she told her that her end was near. That means she knew she is going to die. Further he says, she said that since only a few hours before the close of the last chapter of her life, she had omitted to pray, she was not going to waste any more time talking to us. So here she said that his grandmother said, I forgot to pray for some moment in my life, so I am not going to talk. That means I am going to pray and don't want to waste my time talking before losing the last chapter of her life. We protested, but she ignored our protests. She lay peacefully in bed praying and telling her beads. So here the author is saying that we try to make her understand this is not a time to pray and you have to take some rest, but she ignored our protest. That means she ignored everything whatever they spoke to her, and she lay down in a bed peacefully and started praying and chanting God with her beads. Even before we could suspect, her lips stopped moving and the rosary fell from her lifeless fingers. So here he is saying that before we could suspect, her lips stopped. That means even before we could understand anything, she got died and her lips stopped moving and the rosary fell from her lifeless fingers. That means she was praying to God while lying in a bed, but suddenly rosary fell from her fingers and they understood that she is no more. A peaceful pallor spread on her face and we knew that she was dead. So here he is saying that when she died, a peaceful pallor spread on her face. That means her face became pale and we knew that she was dead. Finally they got to know that she was dead. We lifted her off the bed and, as is customary, laid her on the ground and covered her with a red shroud. So they lifted her off the bed. That means they removed her body from the bed and lied down on the ground, and then they covered her body with a red shroud. So shroud means a kind of red clothes that they are made especially for covering dead bodies. After a few hours of mourning, we left her alone to make arrangements for her funeral. So here he is saying that after a few hours of mourning, that means they cried for her because he lost his grandmother, and then after that they left her alone and went outside to making funeral arrangements. Further he says, in the evening we went to her room with a crude stretcher to make her to be cremated. So after making all the arrangements, they went to her room with a crude stretcher. That means it's a kind of stretcher made of bamboo or other wood, and take her to be cremated. The sun was setting and had lit her room and veranda with a blaze of golden light. We stopped halfway in the courtyard. So it was evening and sun was setting and there was a blaze of golden light. That means the sun was about to set and blaze of golden light was all over in her room and veranda, and we stopped halfway in the courtyard. That means something was there, that's why they stopped there in the halfway in the courtyard. All over the veranda and in her room, right up to where she lay dead and stiff wrapped into the red thread, thousands of sparrows sat scattered on the floor. So here the author is saying that when they were going to take the body, they had to cross the courtyard and then inside the room, but they stopped because there were thousands of birds covered with the veranda and in her room where her body was wrapped in the red shroud, and all the birds were sitting nearby her very quietly. There was no chirruping. We felt sorry for the birds and my mother fetched some bread for them. So the author is saying that there was no chirruping. That means birds were sitting very silently and we felt sorry. And he said, my mother took some bread and started feeding the sparrows as they were sitting very quietly. She broke it into little crumbs the way my mother used to do and threw it to them. So here Kushwant Singh's mother broke the bread into pieces and threw it to them as his grandmother used to do. The sparrow took no notice of the bread. When we carried my grandmother's corpse off, they flew away quietly. So when the Kushwant Singh's mother threw the pieces of bread to them, they did not notice the bread. That means they did not go for bread to pick up. But when they carried their grandmother's dead body, they flew away very quietly. That means that was the strange thing had happened there, and the birds are also feeling very sad for grandmother and flew from there very quietly. Next morning the sweeper swept the breadcrumbs into the dustbin. So here the next morning the sweeper swept the breadcrumbs into the dustbin. That means the birds did not pick up a single piece of bread. So here we can feel how beautifully Kushwant Singh wrote the story A Portrait of a Lady, and how he tells through the story how beautiful she was as a person, because she always spreading peace and calmness all over around, and she never felt that she is not a good looking or be married. So she was very kind human being, as she loved animals and birds, as we have seen in the story as well. So how she used to feed street dogs and sparrows, and she was also a religious lady. So these are the main characteristics that shows that the grandmother was humble and kind personality. This is the end of the chapter A Portrait of a Lady. I hope you like the video. For more informative videos, do subscribe my channel, hit the bell icon so that you get notified whenever new video will be uploaded. So thank you so much for watching once again. Stay safe, stay healthy.